Hi everyone. Well, I thought it was about time I did a bit of an update. There seemed to be a few views of the original video on my setup and on a bit of backyard chicken keeping. It's been an interesting year. Well, 2020 was, with the whole COVID thing, and clearly a lot of people got into backyard chickens, which is great. Hopefully they've had lots of better advice than I can give about how to do that and how to keep it up, because obviously there's a lot to it. And as I said in my last video, I made a lot of mistakes. So if you want to check that out, there's a little bit about the coop behind me, how it's all set up, a lot about pest proofing and some of the mistakes we made in the first year and the losses that we suffered as a result of that. So check that out. It's another one on my channel. A bit weird saying I've got a YouTube channel, but there it is. So I just thought I'd check in, update you a little bit on how it's going, update you on how I winterproof the coop. It's not quite as shiny and new as you saw when I did the original video, which is over a year ago now, and a little bit about what I'm doing in terms of feed, going through molt, etc. I suppose one thing to point out is, for those of you that were new to chicken keeping this year and got chicks in the spring, if you add chicks in the spring, then although laying slows down in the winter, particularly if you don't force with light, which I don't, we give the birds a rest in the winter. We don't try and keep them laying with artificial light and those kinds of things. We let the energy go into keeping the birds warm during the winter, and obviously coming through molt and getting that protein back into a new set of feathers, etc. So we don't do any of that. But if you do get chickens in the spring, then you're lucky to continue usually to get eggs through the winter. This is the first year we haven't had new chicks in the spring, because you'll recall from the last video we had chicks year one. They obviously started laying in the September because we got them in the April, and then we got some eggs through the winter, albeit at a lower rate. Then we suffered some losses through hawks, which is what the last video is all about, how my setup is protecting against predators, both ground and air predators, and how I got lulled into a false sense of security in the summer, thinking I was all set, and then the winter bit, it was a problem. So that's what that video is all about. But when we got new birds for the second season, obviously we then got eggs through last winter as well. This is the first winter season where we have not had eggs, because effectively all our birds are mature now. So as they went through the molt this year, and for the first time they were all in sync as opposed to a stress molt because of a predator attack or something like that, we really concentrated on just keeping them comfortable, warm, and by using feed, that is, and obviously them growing back a great set of new feathers for the winter, and then from the spring and summer. So we haven't had any eggs this year, but here we are in the winter, that is. Here we are in mid-January now, 2021, and you can tell the nights are drawing out already. It's fantastic. So just that sort of an extra 15-20 minutes, we've actually had 4 eggs this week off 11 birds, which they've literally just started again this week, which is fantastic. So let's just take a quick look at, if I switch this around, I'm going to take a quick look at predator proofing again for the winter, just very briefly, but more about the winter setup and how we keep the birds dry and warm. So here's the setup. You may recall this from the last video, and if you haven't seen that, then check it out. It'll give you a whole kind of breakdown on how the coop is set up, the features of the coop. This time of year it doesn't really look very pretty because we've got all the tarps up, but this is a very simple and effective setup. This is the combi coop. So if you haven't seen that video, it's set up with the coop at one end, and then, hello chickalicks, say hello to the chickens on the way through. Hello, how are we doing? All right. So we have the coop at one end, and then you can see at the other end we've got a covered section, and then this is the outdoor covered section with all of the welded wire that protects the birds. So this is their outdoor run, particularly in the winter. And then what you can see inside is a lot more dusty than when you last saw it, but we're protected with tarp. So this is the inside insulated area, and then they've got the entrance into the main coop there. So what we have here is very simply tarps that are bought, you can get them online or on Amazon or whatever, and then just these bungees which attach through the welded wire. So what that does is provide an area that is dry, covered, obviously in my case because we've got the extended combi run there, and then from the outside we've got this complete protection. So the most important thing for the birds in the winter really is to just give them an area where they're protected from the wind more than anything. You know, they can deal with the cold. In my case, I've got cold hardy breeds. Depending where you are in the country, we get, you know, pretty extreme weather sometimes here in New England. I mean, the snow's not down right now, but we're about to go into a cold wave, I think, and a pattern change with high pressure in the west and cold setting up over Canada and into the northeast. So that usually sets up a storm track. So I wouldn't be surprised in the next 10 to 12 days if we're kind of pretty knee deep in snow here. And you'll see, I'll insert a picture just a couple of weeks ago when we had a snowstorm, just how well protected that whole area is. And the nice thing about it is obviously the outside area here gets snow in it. And you know, when the snowstorm stops, I get some straw and I put some straw down, so at least they'll come outside and step on the straw, because they don't really go on the deep snow, obviously. So I clear off the roosts and the perches, the interest I've put in there, and I put some straw down for them to come out. But inside the coop, what's really nice about it is, you know, the snow can be blowing. We get these nor'easters blowing over and piling up snow against here. But the birds are kept warm and dry inside the area here. You know, they perch on their little bench there that we've got for them. All right, very vocal today. And this whole area stays bone dry. So this is just regular earth, but I also put down the very fine dry powder. I can never say it, that diatomaceous earth or whatever it's called. I put that in there so they can dust bathe. And you can actually see, I think it's Annie at the back there. Annie's a white Brahma, and this is our buff Brahma. Hello. You can see down there, she's having a little dust bathe, which is lovely. You know, it's very difficult for them to dust bathe in the winter, because either the ground is rock hard, which is out there, that's all frozen, or it's sopping wet. So they can go under the coop there in the winter, and they can dust bathe because it's dry in here, and that's largely because it's covered, and obviously because we've got these tarps up. You'll recall from the last video, we have the heated water here. That's all on Wi-Fi. Have a bunch of Wi-Fi controlled devices here from the coop tender door, which is Wi-Fi controlled. It's actually on a light sensor, so I don't have to worry about it, but I can open and close it and change the settings on the Wi-Fi on an app on my phone, and also the heater. So like this week when I was away in Seattle, you know, my wife just needs to check the water and the feed while I'm away, but I can make sure that is set so that it comes on and stops the water freezing in the winter. So they're all pretty happy when they go in the coop, and Annie, as I said, is doing her little dust bathe in there. So a little on breeds. I've got a white rock there. I've got Rhode Island Red. As you saw, I've got a white Brahma. I've got a buff Brahma here. I've got a couple of, sorry, no, she's a buff Orpington. I've got a couple of Australorps. Couple of the original silver lace Wyandottes over there, a Rhode Island Red, and I've got a speckled Sussex here. You can tell from my accent I'm from Britain originally, so I like a couple of British breeds in there. You know, there's the Sussex and the buff Orpingtons, originally from Orpington in the UK. But pretty much all of these birds, not so sure on the white rock, but all of these birds are relatively cold hardy. They've got quite small combs, as you can see. Come on, say hello. Except for her, this is this is Pearl. She's a bit of a bruiser, as you can see, but she's lovely. Look how red her Botland comb is. You know, that's a good sign that they're in pretty good health. I think, you know, we keep a close eye on you know, just how healthy they're looking, and we do check them for mites. You know, but as I said, the fact that, you know, you've got Annie in there, for example, doing a little dust bathe, and they can do that in the winter, you know, they look after themselves, and that's keeping the mites down, which is great. Since the last video, I also built this little dust bath area. That's a covered area, both to give them a bit of shade in the summer, and also an area so that it can keep dry even in the summer and dust bathe. That's got just regular earth in. It's got builder's sand in there. It's got some of the diatomaceous earth in there, and also when I have a fire pit, I do actually put the very fine ash in there as well, a little bit. So although it's rock hard right now because it's winter, you know, that area is a really nice dust bath in the summer, and they like to perch along there and just look out into the garden as well. Now obviously this whole area is completely covered and wooded in the summer as well, so there's plenty of shade, but it's also worth just talking about that for a little minute. You know, as it relates to predator proofing, which was the subject of my last video, you know, this is part of the challenge. When we talked in that video, you thought this is completely covered in the summer, so there's a lot of overhead protection from predators, but here we are in the winter, there's nothing going there apart from that evergreen, that fir tree. So, you know, I said in the update in the comment section of my last video, I think pretty much the same two huge hawks came by a couple of weeks ago, almost a year to the day. And I was wondering where the chickens were, and one was perched here, one was perched over there. These are the big kind of 28, 30 inch hawks, and they were the hawks that took the chickens last year. You know, so I actually didn't scare them off. Not that they're pretty bold, you can't scare them off, but I didn't actually take any action. I wanted to see whether or not they could work out whether to get in here. And the answer is they can't, because this is all, in this case on the top, 1 inch welded wire. I've got the 1/2 inch by 1 inch here, and I've got even finer on the actual coop itself. So, you know, I'm not going to be complacent, but I'm pretty sure that they're well protected in this particular setup, which we talked about last time around. So the big update there is really just that, you know, this is very simple. Winterproofing works a treat. So if you've got a covered area and you can put tarps up, fantastic. And that the setup's still working incredibly well. You know, it obviously looks a little bit more dirty now in terms of it's got some dust on it and all that kind of thing, not quite as shiny as when you saw it last. But here we are a couple of years in and it's still working. And when we get to the end of the winter in sort of March time, this will all come down, we'll start to grow the herbs again. You know, I'll plant out the little herb garden we've got round the back here. You know, all this area is usually full of veggies and herbs, some for us, some for the birds. And I'll probably do a little bit of a video on some of the things we do to keep the chickens cool and hydrated in the summer as well. I'll do that, you know, in a few months' time, I guess, when we get a bit closer. Just a quick look in the coop. You'll recall from last time there's some features in here. It's a really nice coop. It's got the egg boxes over here, and as I said earlier in the video, the nights are just starting to draw out now in mid-January, so the egg laying started again, which is great. They are actually heated roosters, heated roost bars. We don't actually use those. People will tell you not to heat coops generally for fire risk. We don't tend to. I mean, if it got down to -18 centigrade, 0 Fahrenheit outside, I might put that on. That's a little low voltage, low heat panel that just keeps the coop about 15 degrees Fahrenheit above outside. We have actually insulated the roof. It's an insulated metal roof, and also we've put this kind of insulation in there as well. So if you've got the right size coop, in this case we've got 11 birds in here, and it's dry and it's free from drafts, they'll probably be good and keep themselves to themselves and keep themselves pretty warm. I've got the little temperature sensor in there. They're the sensor push sensors. They're all linked into the house, and I've also got you know, the little Nest video camera up there, so I can keep keep my eye on the chickens, make sure they're all set, make sure they're all in at night. The door automatically closed. So I'll leave it there in terms of the actual coop itself, and we'll just talk briefly about what I'm doing on feed. Okay, so a little bit on feed. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 components to the feed that I use for the chickens. This is my old coop, by the way, which is kind of still at right angles and connected to the new coop. I use it really for storage of all my feed, keep the, you know, the vermin out and any kind of animals, any kind of that kind of thing. And you know, when and if I introduce new chicks as well, this is connected, so I can clear all this out. I can set the chicks up. I have basically a dog crate in the basement, which I set them up with a heat lamp when they're tiny, and when they're ready to come back outside, they live in here. And they can access the main run, but it's segregated so that we can get the chickens used to one another and then slowly commingle them as the pecking order is established, and avoid any kind of conflict and any damage you know, between the two. So this time, obviously not using it for new chicks, I'm just using it for feed. So I tend to use layer crumble in my case. Just this is a neutrino crumble. I use the 16% protein layer crumble. They tend to like that a little bit better. I also occasionally in winter I'll do them at like a warm mash, so I'll put some hot water with that and just you know, let that set up almost like an oatmeal, and I put that in the coop. They enjoy that, and in the summer I do the same but with cold water. I don't get them too used to that. For the most part they have dry feed, and in the winter obviously it can freeze, so it becomes a little bit more difficult. So it tends to be more of a summer thing where I'm just giving them a cold water mash just to help continue to hydrate them. And I'll do maybe a video on some of those things, as I said earlier, that I do in the summer a little bit later. I do also occasionally in the winter, obviously they have some treats, so I use a small amount of scratch feed, which has got the corn in, which is mixed with a few you know, natural mealworms. Don't do too many of those. Too much protein can not be good for their organs, so I don't do too much of that. It's like a quarter handful of mealworms, you know, I guess about that much scratch feed, not a lot. And I just throw that around, give them some interest. Occasionally when it thaws out a bit, I also turn over the soil with a fork in there, to freshen it up. I remove any poop, I turn it over. There's usually some fresh worms underneath, which they love. Obviously they're all following me around looking for the worms and scratching around. I put leaves in there and a bit of you know, stuff from the wood, just so that they scratch. And what I do is I throw the scratch feed and the mealworms and any of those little treats around. I throw them around with turned over earth. I throw a bunch of stuff on top, and then it's nice just to stand back and watch them scratch, which is naturally what they love to do. So it keeps them interested, it keeps them from pecking one another. Just a really easy way in a, you know, a small earth space to, although there's some interest in there, it keeps them you know, interested and engaged. And it's one of those sort of chicken environment enrichment things that you can do. Whether it's hanging little treats, things that they peck that move, that keep them interested, you know, leaves, twigs, bit of food underneath, turn the earth, all of those things are a great way of keeping them occupied, which is a good thing. So the first thing we're going to do is full bags, it's pretty heavy. Put some of the food in. So I put the feed in. Next thing I do is I put a bit of oyster shell in. You probably know all this, I'm just showing you what I do, but they've not needed a lot of this over the winter because you don't want to give them too much calcium. The oyster shell's for the calcium, for the shell of the egg, but they're starting to lay again. So I'm going to start just slowly introducing a little bit of oyster shell into their feed now. Some people free feed this, so they'll put them in little cups, and chickens are pretty good at self-regulating, so like the same way they know how much food to eat and how much to drink, they'll do the same with oyster shell, and they'll eat the oyster shell as they think they need it. Because what you don't want is, if they haven't got enough you know, calcium for the eggs, it'll start robbing it from their bones, and obviously we don't want that, because we don't want any you know, limb issues. So I put a bit of oyster shell in there, not too much. Obviously to help their digestion, don't have teeth like us, so I'm going to put a poultry grit in there, not too much again. And then the other things that I add are, I also add some Coop kelp, which is packed full of minerals and vitamins. It's really great for egg production. It supports their immune system. You know, it's full of vitamins, micro, macro nutrients, amino acids. It really helps them thrive. Things like calcium, iodine, zinc, magnesium. So it just keeps them really, really strong and healthy. And when you see that in you know, their comb and the redness, that's all signs that they're pretty healthy. So I'll just put a little bit of this in, not too much. A little bit of that in. I'm going to mix all this round, obviously. And then the other addition I make is brewer's yeast. Now, as you can tell, I'm originally from Britain, so I love my Marmite. I don't know whether you've heard of that, but Marmite, or if you're in Australia, Vegemite, that's brewer's, you know, yeast extract as well. In my case, I put it on toast, but it's packed full of B vitamins. It's absolutely fantastic for your immune system. It's fantastic for your nervous system. So if I'm lucky enough to live to 100 and somebody says to me, what's your secret? It's going to be Marmite. And in the case of the chickens, what we're giving them is a little bit of brewer's yeast. This also has a bit of garlic in, and as you might know, things like garlic and anything from that family has got natural antimicrobial properties. So these are all good things for gut health, and hopefully what we want to do is to keep pathogens down. The thing I haven't said is I'm actually a food scientist, so I do quite a lot of microbiology with my work, so I'm very tuned into things like E. coli and salmonella and listeria, and how to keep that out of food plants and food production and ready to eat food. And what we want to do is keep that at bay, in a chicken population. Albeit I've only got 11 birds, we want to keep that to the absolute lowest it can be, which is why I keep it very clean in there, very dry, because those kinds of pathogens need moisture. In summer I'm giving them plenty of herbs, rosemary, oregano, or oregano as we'd say here in New England, herbs, those kinds of things, anything natural that can keep those bacterial levels low. I'm also quite big, before I get back to the feed, on biosecurity. So I don't know whether you heard of that, but in my food, although I'm not in food procurement right now, I'm in food safety and quality and those kinds of things in my day-to-day job. In the past I've spent quite a lot of time in hatcheries and animal production and seeing how it's done on an industrial scale, and I've spent time in hatcheries and those kinds of things, and I've seen the lengths that industry goes to maintain biosecurity, and it's no different with a small flock. So I don't let people in that area. I certainly don't let people go in there without changing their shoes. I've got a pair of boots here that only ever go in that chicken coop area. They don't go anywhere else. They go from the house to there and nowhere in between. If this was a commercial farm, you'd probably have a dip bath where you'd dip your shoes as well in some kind of disinfectant, because the wild bird population carries disease too, whether it's flu type diseases and viral diseases, whether it's bacteria and so on and so forth. So any bird feeders for normal woodland birds and things that we like to see, I keep those well away from this coop. They're all at the bottom end of my yard, or my garden here. So I do feed the birds, but they're kept at the other end to the extent they can, and it seems to work, because I actually don't see a lot of birds at this end. Probably also helped by the fact I've got a fake owl right there in that tree. So the little birds and those beautiful red birds, the cardinals we get here, don't come anywhere near the coop for that reason, I think, which is probably a good thing. They're all at the other end. So I think, coming back to the feed, brewer's yeast, kelp, those kinds of things, anything that can keep that kind of gut health thing going is a good idea. This actually smells, it smells really good. I love brewer's yeast. So basically that's, they're my additions. I give that a good mix up. Stick the rest of the bag in, do the same. Actually smells pretty good. So it's got a little bit of oyster shell in there, a little bit of grit to help the digestion, and obviously the kelp and the brewer's yeast. So that's kind of it really. A bit on the winterproofing, a bit on the feed, what I'm doing there. A little bit in there about biosecurity and not letting anyone else in your area, or certainly not without shoe covers or something like that, and particularly not if they've got poultry. If you know anybody else that's got poultry, don't let a person who's keeping chickens come into your coop without some kind of footwear change, or you provide them with shoe covers or whatever else. Really easy to spread disease from one population to the other, as we kind of all know with this COVID thing. So best of luck with it. Hope you're enjoying keeping your chickens, and for people like me that have been doing it a little while now, we're looking forward to getting back into egg season. My daughter's loving the Great British Baking Show. So it's baking sponges and all that kind of thing. We don't really like buying store-bought eggs to do that, so we're really looking forward to start doing that with our own eggs. So good luck for the rest of the winter, and maybe put something on in the spring and summer around what we do in the summer to keep the birds cool and happy when all that humidity and heat arrives. So bye for now.